therapist and YouTuber now, Brad. I think we can quite comfortably say you're building up a good following on that. For any of the people that haven't come across any of your videos, can you just give us a bit of a background about yourself?
Yes, I have a master's in psychology. So here in California, I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. And I started a private practice for myself about going on about 6 years now. But I've actually had my degree in psychology since '97, so for quite a while. But with my practice, probably, a couple of years ago, I decided, let me do some videos on YouTube, psychologically related. And I think that focusing in on what I'm familiar with, in my childhood, I was a victim of emotional incest. So I started there, and that seems definitely to have some traction. But I try to talk about a broad array of topics as well. But I definitely can tell that some of the more messier ones, we want to call it that, the messier in terms of family dynamics, childhood trauma, covert narcissism, the fine line between physical incest versus emotional incest, anything to do with that, I can tell that I get a few more views on those videos. And I think it is a topic that people are afraid on some level to look at, or if they're not afraid, maybe they're curious, but they don't want to sort of step into any of the messiness, because if you've been afflicted by these topics in any way, it's going to maybe trigger you. And I think some people don't want to be triggered, so they may avoid them. But I'm surprised that particularly the ones with emotional incest seem to be interesting to people.
Well, I mean, let's lead on from that, because I've seen your videos, and part of what kind of instigated reaching out and contacting you is that the topic we're talking about, kind of difficult topics for people and triggers and things like that. And I think as soon as you mention, I think the form of abuse, covert incest, emotional incest, first and foremost is, I think the term has been vilified by people in the professional industry, in the media and things like that, because as soon as you mention the word incest, straight away people associate that with incestuous kind of sex between family members. Now, can you just give us a breakdown and more clarification on exactly what is the definition of covert incest and emotional incest? First and foremost, are those two the same thing?
There can be a slight differentiation between those two things. So somebody can be a victim of emotional incest, and it may not be covert at all. The parent may be happily smothering the child. They're in a bad marriage, let's say. They don't want to deal with their husband or wife, and they make it very obvious that they are taking over a child, so to speak, turning them into a mini husband or mini wife. And there's nothing covert about it whatsoever. Now, people may not see it as any kind of child abuse necessarily, because they look like a close unit and they're having fun and they have smiles on their faces. So on that level, it may not seem that way, but it is out there, so to speak. Now, that's a little bit different just in terms of covert incest is a bit more hidden, and a parent may go out of their way to put on a bit of an act to not let others know. Maybe they're aware of what they're doing, but it really is a very fine line. It's not too important in a way, because the child's going to suffer in the same way either way. So it's not really too important. But covert incest, I think, also ties into covert narcissism is another title we hear a lot about. So I think that what I find draws even more attention is perhaps covert narcissism, which, of course, is the opposite of somebody who's grandiose and puts on and all that when we think of a narcissist. So we have these terms. In terms of emotional incest, there's not a whole lot of difference, except there are parents who are happy to let the world know, perhaps, that they're turning their son or daughter into a mini wife or mini husband. And so they're not trying to hide it whatsoever. But either which way, it's all about the emotional smothering of a child. It's the taking over of a child for their own emotional incest, to make themselves feel better. There's no physical touching whatsoever. It doesn't necessarily involve that. It's just basically a parent wants a companion. They want somebody to lean on the way that you normally would lean on a husband or a wife. And they're not willing, perhaps, to work out their difficulties in a marriage. Let's say it's a married couple. They simply are either afraid or don't want to confront the spouse or really have to go inward and look at what's going on in them. So rather than deal on any level with all the complicated issues that are arising in the marriage, they decide, oh, you know what? I have a quick fix here. I have a son that, he's kind of malleable. He's kind of a good-natured kid. She's kind of eyeing him. Maybe she has several kids, but a parent will zoom in on the one that seems the most vulnerable. And then before you know it, all of a sudden they are taking them over, so to speak, and bringing them with them to all sorts of adult activities, telling them a lot of their adult problems, and the list goes on and on. So, it's something, I use the word insidious a lot because a lot of people don't want to see it. It's kind of hard to see, and it's tricky to see sometimes, but it definitely does exist.
Yeah, I mean, I will disclose with you, as you have done earlier on, I've been a victim of emotional incest, and it was probably only around about 4 to 5 years ago that I actually realized that what had happened to me as a child. Now, I've got an exclusively male audience. So am I right in thinking that the majority of emotional incest goes on between the opposite sexes, i.e. a mother and son or a father and daughter?
Yes, I would say the majority for sure, opposite sex. And even the more majority is with mother to son. And I have to remind people sometimes, or I'll get questions, but it definitely does happen from father to daughter, or even with the same sex. So that is, the frequency is definitely lesser, but absolutely the majority are opposite sex, yes.
And obviously, emotional incest is about crossing boundaries, but to the exterior, to the outside world, and also I would point out to probably the child at a particular point of time, is the child doesn't know what's going on. It may feel awkward at times. Certainly in my experience, I was exposed to conversations that a young teenage boy didn't necessarily want to hear about. Mother's problems with the husband, sex life, relationship problems, emotion, things like that. So there's a hell of a burden that's actually put onto the child, the victim, as it were. But you don't realize that at the time. One, because you're too young to know any different. But to outside worlds and other members of friends and family, it can almost seem that they're a doting father or a doting mother that's not overstepping any boundaries. What would be a kind of typical scenario of those boundary crosses?
Well, you mentioned a couple right there. Anything to do with, it's definitely inappropriate for sure. We'll say that much. So, for example, let's say a mother, she would normally go to her husband to talk about her maybe depressed mood, perhaps, or she feels anxiety at work, or she is having trouble with PMS or her period or something, or she's feeling not quite as attracted to him as what she did when they were married. So these are personal topics meant to be between a husband and a wife, let's say. So in this case, we'll say there's a poor marriage and she can't talk to her husband about these things. She doesn't want to. So she's telling her son, we'll just say, all these topics that normally should be reserved for a spouse. So it will definitely bring up perhaps an icky feeling to the child, depending on the age when this starts, where the son or daughter is like, what is going on here? This feels weird. But then again, I feel kind of special. They seem to want to be, they're revealing things to me that they're not revealing to my brothers and my sisters. So I guess maybe I'm sort of special. It kind of makes you feel good as a kid. So that can be a bit confusing. And then it just simply continues from there. And it could turn into, for example, things that in this case a mother may do with her lady friends. Like, for example, going shopping all Saturday afternoon. That's typically a lady's activity. She may want to do that with women her own age. But instead of hanging out with women her own age and or going to lunch after or something, she's now bringing her son. Come on, son, be ready at 1. We're going to go shopping all afternoon. We'll look at the sales. You can help me try on dresses. You can tell me what you think is pretty or not pretty. And then maybe, I'm going to go get my hair done. You can sit there and wait for me. And then we'll go have lunch. We'll have a nice lunch after. So these are things you either do with your adult peers, adult friends, or the lunch part definitely with a husband. So this is all just sort of unloaded and dumped on a child. The child won't know what to do with it initially. As I mentioned, they actually feel perhaps special. But over time, what they begin to realize is it's conditional. We have a conditional love here. So you're hearing all about the parents' issues and the parents' problems. And as long as you sort of nod and go along with that, and you're sort of a good boy or a good girl, everything seems to be okay, because that's why the parent is doing it. They're unhappy inside. They don't want to face life's problems, so to speak. So then now they're emotionally taking over a child. Well, they don't want to hear what that child is really going through. So that includes that. That includes that they can't tolerate to really help this child have their own strong identity. They don't want to hear that. That's the reason they can't hear it from their husband or their wife. That's the whole reason for this. It's because they want to be in sort of la-la land. So now you have a child who's being raised this way, who maybe will want to talk about his or her day and want to talk about some emotional issues coming up for them or things that are important to them. Whatever it is, it could be anything. And the parent will show either verbally or non-verbally that they're really not that interested, not really. And if you are going to tell me something, it better be something that's sort of upbeat and positive, because they don't know what to do with anything negative or any real emotion. That's why they couldn't work out their marriage. So now you have a child picking up on these cues, and he or she is realizing like, oh, I better be sort of artificial or a people pleaser or a bit of a chameleon or put on a happy face at least. So this kid is getting these messages year after year after year, and it's extremely damaging to their identity development. Very, very damaging. And they don't even know it at the time. That's what is even more confusing. It takes usually until somebody's in their 20s at least before they can even begin to piece this together. And what may perhaps be the precipitating event for this is all of a sudden they're having trouble in relationships. They can't maintain having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They have intimacy issues. They don't know how to be authentic. They still want to be a people pleaser with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. And then that will begin, hopefully, to cue them into like, oh, there's some issues here. What's this about? And so hopefully at that point, but it could be even later in their 30s even, that they may decide, you know what, let me go talk to a professional about this, and then hopefully get some insight, because it's very damaging, and it's not something that's obvious. It's, like with a child comes to school and shows the teacher, oh, look at my black and blue marks. Okay, well, they're going to be investigated. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Or showing somebody, a doctor, look what happened to my vagina or my penis, and there's bruising there. So adults can see what's going on, and of course, then they're rescued. Hopefully, the child's rescued. But with emotional incest, not in the least, because on the outside, it looks like a very happy dynamic, a very happy family, very happy parent-child relationship, and it's anything but that. It's very, very toxic.
Yeah, because I think when the majority of, I suffered childhood abuse by both parents, but in very, very different ways. And I think the one thing that's very difficult for people is that emotional abuse, forget emotional incest, but emotional abuse, for me growing up, I didn't really put in the same bracket as sexual or physical abuse. So there might have been insecurities or issues that I had with, depression and things like that. And I kind of always never realized that I was a victim of abuse, because you didn't get battered, you didn't get beaten, or you wasn't touched in an inappropriate way. You need to grow up, you need to man up, words are only words, you brush them off, especially as a male. we're taught the whole masculinity is to not show that you've been hurt. It's, in a lot of families, in the way that people are brought up. So for me personally, it wasn't until I think, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, but one, emotional incest is a very, very misunderstood form of abuse. And I only realized that there was particular issues in my childhood when I read Neil Strauss's book, The Truth, and he spoke about the relationship he had with his mother. And the first I'd heard about it is when he spoke about emotional incest and the way that she had a dysfunctional relationship with his father and would confide in Neil as a young boy going through puberty and would, confide in him and almost built a barrier and a bridge between him and his father. So it caused more problems in his relationship growing up, and it kind of took on the role of the almost surrogate husband, or the other best friend. And I was introduced to a book by Kenneth Adams, Silently Seduced. And upon reading that and finished it, I'm going to admit to you, I literally burst into tears and thought, fuck me, this shit is real. This is a diagnosed form of abuse. And I would just really want to share with all of the guys listening to this podcast that there are triggers and it can have a knock-on effect for adulthood. And like you say, in terms of identity issues, relationship issues, and things like that. Because I don't think there's a lot of people I think of or who have been victims of emotional incest and don't actually realize it. So they don't know the steps to take to actually overcome that. What does a typical client that comes to you with those historic problems, what would be the kind of first steps in, I suppose, trying to repair them and get them back to a good mindset, good mental health, as it were?
Yes, well, what a therapist generally will see with this topic is the first thing is to break them out of their denial. And that can be difficult because you want to protect the perpetrating parent. They're the one who, quote unquote, loved you. They did everything for you. They were the best. Now, the therapist can see and knows that actually is where the problem lies. The client is not realizing they've been emotionally smothered, emotionally taken over, but they're coming in because they're struggling with some aspect of their life. So the first thing, at least for me, that I struggle with a lot is breaking through the denial. And everybody works a little bit differently. I tend to be a little more hard-hitting. I tend to use words that will shock them into it because I know they have to hear it this way in order to grow. Because we can't sugarcoat this. Their whole childhood has been sugarcoated. Nothing's been looked at. Nothing's been addressed. So if they come into therapy, a proper therapist is not going to sugarcoat this, in my opinion. So I work on breaking through the denial. A lot of people, clients will cling to the notion. They have a hard time believing that this parent that they've shared all their intimate secrets with, or they've heard, I should say, all the intimate secrets of the parent, who they've done so much with, who everybody thinks they're so close and so on. They have a really hard time. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance around the notion that this so-called loving parent has actually been abusing me my whole life. And they absolutely have been. And so it takes a while to get them to realize this, because not only are they going to have strong feelings about the parent in terms of rage they haven't addressed, all sorts of guilt about now talking about the parent in a negative way in the therapist's office. But then that's that's major in and of itself. But then at some point, they're going to have to go inward and look at how it's affected them. Well, that's a huge topic right there, because that can affect you in terms of self-loathing, self-criticism. Well, no, they'll say, I like myself, I love myself. But what they're not realizing quite yet is part of the reason they have an eating disorder, or they're an alcoholic, or they're cutting themselves, which is anything but loving yourself, is because of the relationship with the parent. So you have to break through the denial and help them understand that when you have to mirror back to a parent what they want, it infers then that you're a piece of crap. It infers that basically you're a piece of shit because you can't really be who you are, and you're not wanted to be who you are. The parent doesn't want to hear that. So the message the child gets over many years is there must be something wrong with me. I must not be good enough. My mother or my father doesn't seem to want to hear about my life, so I must be a doormat. So of course they're not going to have the words for it the way I'm saying it right there, but those are the feelings inside. I'm a doormat. I'm there just to be there to please other people. So now you have this, let's just call him or her a doormat. So now the doormat is now in their 20s. Well, they're relating to life now as a doormat. They're trying to date people and develop friendships and relationships as a doormat. And it's going to catch up with them, of course. And this is when, though, it's a great time because if they do come in for therapy, this is when they can really be assisted and get to know themselves. But it's a tricky process, and that's why a lot of people cling to it because there's so many aspects. Your whole childhood, in a way, has been a facade, and you have to be willing to look at that and deal with it and tolerate very uncomfortable feelings about all that. And it can be very challenging, but that's the reality of it. And anytime you shine a spotlight on something, it's going to be helpful. So I just try to reinforce with my clients that it may be difficult work right now, but as you reclaim yourself, you're just going to so much more enjoy your life. You're going to have a you there, whereas let's say the last 25 years, you haven't had a you there. It's been no one there. So now you get to discover yourself. And so if you can kind of help the client see that side of it, then they'll stay with the work, and it is work, and you have to stay with it usually for a few years.
Yeah, and that, in my experience, often results. It has to result in some form of therapy to actually overcome and get through that. I've put on events and I've hosted events before where I think, and again, we've got an exclusively male audience, hence the name Male Mastery. But I think a lot of people, the first hurdle that they find is actually accepting and realizing that they have actually been in, should we say, they've been taken in and had boundaries broken down. They have, because I think a lot of people my mum, no, she was just nice. She was just going through a little bit of trouble herself. She didn't mean anything by it. And something that's come up as well is, there was certainly no touching. But again, we have to get past this. Yes, it is taboo because of the sheer term of incest as soon as you hear that. But inappropriate conversations, the knock-on effect from being somebody, as a young child going into teenagehood, maybe going through puberty and things like that, the knock-on effect that it has for people's identity. I've also found that people I know of have maybe been a little bit inauthentic in their adulthood because they're always trying to be that people pleaser, especially when it comes to relationships with the opposite sex. And again, as Dr. Robert Greene would have us all be, no more Mr. Nice Guy, is that can cause a real knock-on effect with relationships, but also relationships with your children, and can seem a little bit distant. I know you can't give an exact process because everybody's different, but the thing that I want to stress to any of the listeners that are maybe sitting there thinking, hold up a minute, this is ringing true to me, is... when is enough, but at what point does it go from having a loving, smothering parent to, do you know what, that's gone too far? Or is that an impossible question to answer?
No, it's a really, really good question. And it does take somebody being willing to look at it and assess it in an honest way. And that can be tricky when you're doing it on your own. Sometimes you need somebody objective with you, which ideally would be a therapist. But yes, it is a fair question. Anybody can ask. So right now, if somebody's out there listening and wondering, ask yourself, do you find that you have to monitor a lot of what you say with the parent, with the offending parent? Do you find that you get anxious or nervous about having a conversation when the focus is on you and you're wanting to reveal something that they may not like? So definitely, if you can't express negative emotion, do you have a hard time getting angry at that parent? That's a normal part of childhood development. We get angry. Kids need to get angry when they're 5, 6, 7. And then they realize the parent comes over and gives them a big hug and says, why are you so mad at mommy or daddy? And then they tell the parent, and the child begins to associate the fact that this normal emotion called anger is something to be shared. And then and not only did I share it, but I got to talk about it. My parent didn't rush me. And then after, I got a big hug, and my my dad gave me a sucker to suck on. So, I mean, so meaning you have this pleasant experience associated with negative emotions, and you realize it's okay to be angry or mad or pissed off at a parent. So if you're listening now and you can't get angry or pissed off or mad at a parent, why not? What's that about? That's a normal emotion. If you feel you're hiding certain things from them, why are you doing that? If you feel you have to be the chameleon, that's a term most of us know, or a people pleaser, maybe around the parent, but in other aspects of your life. What's that about? Why is it hard for you to voice an honest opinion? Why do you want to frame things in a certain way? So begin challenging yourself with this. And if you stay with it and you're willing to do this, a lot of people aren't, because they want to deny this. It's hard to look at. That's part of the reason that's part of the reason denial can be so strong. It's an excellent defense mechanism built into us. So, but if you're able to stay with it, then you'll be able to understand yourself more deeply. And it'll help you in so many ways, because what happens is that if you're behaving this way with the parent, then you're going to really struggle in an intimate relationship, because you're not just going to find these skills out of the blue. Let's say you're 22 and you haven't dealt with any of this, and all of a sudden you're falling in love, you have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, lo and behold, you don't have some magic wand to just pull out, and all of a sudden you have this excellent, in-depth, honest, authentic behavior with a boyfriend or girlfriend. No, it doesn't work that way. You have no idea how to do it. You don't have the skills to do it. It's too frightening to do it. So that's why we have to hopefully work with the crux of it, the root of it, which of course is with the parent. Once we work this out with the parent and we have firm boundaries in whatever way that means, including up to no contact for some people, then it becomes easier then to implement it into our day-to-day life with our significant other. But it's all a process. It's all connected. People want it to be a little more disconnected, like just I'll solve it over here and this will be okay. No, it doesn't work that way in psychology. It's sort of all blended together. And so we have to kind of look at it that way. That's the healthiest way to view it.
But I think the key point there for anyone listening is this isn't just going to go away. You don't all of a sudden overnight become confident, find your identity, have this newfound relationship with that parent. You have to do that deep internal work, because without that work, you're not going to understand on a deeper level. You know, I do believe that, we are a byproduct of what we consume. And if we've consumed that sort of relationship with a parent growing up, things aren't just going to magically change overnight. So my next question for you really is, somebody identifies that they have been a victim of emotional incest. They can then go and seek therapy themselves. But do you have any guidance or advice for maintaining, or should I say, I don't know if you actually want to maintain that relationship if it's that way, but would you give anybody any advice on how to deal with that parent if they're still in contact with the parent? Or is it or do you have to completely separate yourself and give yourself some distance and space there? What would your advice be?
So there's no set way of doing it whatsoever, but it's a very hot topic with people when they're working through this, because that's the one area that everybody has to decide for themselves. And there's different ways depending on the depth of abuse, how severe the taking over of the child emotionally was and is. So with my client load over the years, I have clients that handle it all sorts of ways. And nothing is necessarily right or wrong, but if somebody is not willing, if a client's not willing to stop or at least reduce contact with the parent, then that tells you something right there. So meaning, like you kind of wonder why they're still clinging to the parent. Is it something they're facing but not totally? What makes them want to be around somebody who doesn't allow them to be their authentic self, doesn't value them when they're their authentic self? So it's something that can come up in the therapy. A therapist will notice that they're struggling with this, and then of course they would want to probe with them about that. So I have people that all the way from no contact, they're very comfortable with that. They thrive, they enjoy it, and that is A-okay, absolutely A-okay. A lot of people do that. Then anywhere in between, all the way to still perhaps seeing the parent on a regular basis. I have one client now who has really been heavily traumatized. It's affected her in her whole life. She chooses, her mother's getting older, and so she chooses at this stage to maintain some contact at least once a week and kind of be there if the mother needs her for any health issue or something. So she's choosing it that way. So any and all of it's okay, but the therapist really has to work with the client in understanding what the motivation is, why. What are you afraid of something with the no contact? What does it mean? Because if you have no contact, you're left with yourself. And just being with ourselves is absolutely terrifying to most people. We want to have some facade or the illusion that we're somehow connected. So because they're not really connected to a parent who doesn't want to know them, but they have the illusion in their mind that they are. Well, when they remove that illusion, then some people literally feel like they're just simply somehow going to die. They have it's that fight or flight response inside. And so you have to, a skilled therapist has to work with what their fear is, and the fear can be very intense.
Yeah, I think sometimes breaking that connection, breaking that contact with the parent can almost leave the victim kind of almost exposed, naked as such. And again, if they're not confident in themselves, that's that emotional tie, isn't it? It's almost the relationship with that parent can sometimes seem like that comfort blanket. Or what would I do without my parent? Or the parent's not going to be able to last without me, and they feel that moral obligation to actually still stay attached. And unfortunately, you are the child, and a parent has a responsibility to be a parent, and by putting that kind of emotional hindrance on you from such a young age, they're almost taking away your identity as such, and almost just, I think the term using you, because they are in essence, aren't they? They're using you to replace a dysfunctional husband or wife. You mentioned earlier, Brad, about kind of covert narcissism, and obviously I'm conscious of time, so I don't need to, I don't want to go down the narcissism route, but what would a typical diagnosis be for a narcissistic parent? Do they show any kind of visible signs?
Yes, and I just want to say one thing on the comment on what you just said a minute ago. It doesn't necessarily have to be because of difficulties in a marriage or with a husband or wife. I just want to point that out because that's important. There may be some single parents thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm not doing anything wrong here. No, it could be somebody just wanting to have a child and having no intent of settling down with a spouse or a significant other. And so just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with covert narcissism, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question one more time about covert narcissism?
Are there, you mentioned earlier that sometimes there was a connection from a parent being a covert narcissist or having narcissistic tendencies to then go on and treat the child, with emotional incest. Are there any visible signs or kind of things that you could highlight that would be a sign of a parent that's got covert narcissism? And obviously covert in itself is kind of under the radar, but are there any kind of visible signs that a parent and narcissism?
Well, that's a good question because it is so well hidden. So if you're observing, let's say somebody has family members or friends, let's say it's a father and a daughter, and you're observing that the daughter with the father is always just being well behaved, putting on a nice little act, always in a people pleaser mode, and they do that in general. And you're noticing this over time. So I'm not talking about just one incident, but the child is not revealing much of themselves. You really don't know the child. They're not acting like a typical teenager who may sometimes would act out and be belligerent. And that's part of growing up and sharing all sorts of opinions and so on. So if you're noticing that most of their identity is not showing, you get a glossed view of it, then that's one of the signs, and it's hard to pinpoint these signs, so we'll talk about it, but that's one of the signs of where a child may perhaps be emotionally taken over by a parent because they're having to behave in a certain way. If you don't see the parent at all, but maybe you just have a friend or family member that you hang out with who is maybe in their late teens or early 20s, and they are showing symptoms in regards to the self-loathing or identity being stripped away. When an identity is stripped away, it's so terrifying to somebody turning into an adult, because you don't know how to relate to life, really. You don't, of course, know who you are. You weren't helped with that by your own parent, who, by the way, is the one who's supposed to help you find your wings in life and leave the nest. So you've been robbed of that. So that self-loathing may turn into eating disorders, cutting, depressed mood, of course, all sorts of things. And so drinking too much. And here's where it gets tricky, because a lot of people have those symptoms. Those are symptoms for something, some sort of abuse in their life. So somebody can just simply ask them if they're willing to have a conversation about it. What's that about? But it's hard to pinpoint, because the whole point of being a covert narcissist is they have the determination inside. That's the definition of being a narcissist, so to speak. They love and enjoy sort of being the main man or the main woman. That's what a narcissist is. It's all about them. Now, they can be, the reason it's tricky is because they can be totally engaging, lovely people, very outgoing, charismatic. And so people see them, they gravitate towards someone like that. Well, because of that, it's difficult to imagine or think or believe that they really are stripping away the identity of one of their children. Now, somebody may think, well, maybe. So then they're around the family, and then they notice that, the parent and the child have an excellent relationship. So I must be wrong. There's really nothing wrong here. Look, they're kind of joking. They're playing a board game. They're watching TV together. So you can't really pinpoint it, really. And that's what makes it so difficult.
What a great parent they are.
Yes, absolutely. And so we can see why it's very tricky, right? Because part of the taking over is that it appears to be a good, healthy relationship. So that's why it is very confusing. And that's why even to the child, we have to break through their denial when they come in for therapy, because everybody's told them and they believe, like, no, oh my gosh, I have a great relationship with, let's say it's the father. I have a great relationship with my father. And they're not willing to they're not ready or willing yet to look at the fact that that's actually the cause of all your emotional pain. So it's very tricky. That's why I think it gets ignored a little bit. People just don't want to go there. Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because aren't many abusers to the outside world either pillars of the community, doting husbands or fathers, and everyone, no, did that really? They seems like such a lovely person, until that door's closed. Again, and this is the thing with a lot of people that are, that are abusers themselves, is that, on face value, they seem a great person to everybody else, but it's not until that you, like I say, that you close that door that the real person really comes out. But again, that's, the whole narcissism is maybe another podcast further down the line. So for anyone that acknowledges what we've discussed tonight, I can recommend everybody a book, Silently Seduced. There's a revised and updated edition, I think it was out 4 or 5 years ago, Kenneth Adams. Is there any other reading material, websites, books, or anything like that you could particularly recommend? Because not everybody's in that position, Brad, are they, to all of a sudden it's like, right, okay, let's just go straight through to a therapist. I think some people need to get more of an understanding of what they've gone through and more of an understanding of the process. Are there any kind of websites or books that you can recommend for somebody?
Well, the book that you brought up is excellent, Silently Seduced. And I have not read many of the books out there. There are a few that I hear good comments about. I'm not too familiar. If somebody is not ready for therapy, I would say just go to YouTube, and if you can, find, just sort of scope out what you want to look at if it appeals to you. It may come up as emotional smothering. It may come up as loss of identity. It may come up as emotional incest. One idea that I think would be helpful is just simply called 12 Signs of Emotional Incest. And that may also be a good place for somebody to start with, because you're right. There is some cognitive dissonance about just simply jumping into therapy. There is a process to it. Unfortunately, I don't have any other titles, but I definitely can agree with the Silently Seduced is a good eye opener, and it can really get somebody maybe thinking about their own life.
Yeah, well, as again, I'd highly recommend your videos because, I'm trying to think what I come across a couple of other videos. I think on narcissism. I was speaking with, had a chat with Richard Grannon. Is a guy from the UK that covers a lot about MPD, narcissistic personality disorder and things like that. And then your videos cropped up, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, right, okay, let's look into that, because, I have sought therapy for the abuse I was exposed to when I was a child. And anybody that's listening to this, I have to stress to you that I can't say 100%, but I think it's 99% of people, if they're going to overcome this, they have to do the work internally, and you have to speak to a professional, because you might think you're clever and you can overcome that, but there's always going to be deep-rooted problems further down the line that could crop up later in life, but also hinder your opportunity to have a great loving relationship with a wife and children. So I highly recommend anybody that is touched or can relate to anything that we've discussed today to go out, check out your videos, and then also take the steps at a time that they're comfortable and a time that they're ready to maybe speak to a therapist to overcome some of these issues. Apart from YouTube, Brad, are you on any other social media?
I just have an Instagram channel, which is under my name, and then, but primarily I focus on YouTube, and that seems to reach. I'm just thrilled that some people are being educated by some of the videos, particularly about emotional incest, and whatever it takes, because they may be struggling in their life and not knowing why, and this may be one of the last things they're thinking about. And so when people can find information anywhere, including books, websites, it's just fantastic, because we need to just have a little more awareness about it. We're raised by our parents. We didn't pick our parents, and they've got us. I mean, there we are. We're young, and we're growing up. We're being taught what they want to teach us. And if they're not healthy parents, then we have to be able to look at that and at least talk about it, if nothing else.
Yeah, 100%. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you for taking the time out to be on the podcast this evening, but also for the content that you put out. I think it's very, very effective, and I think it's certainly needed out there. So thank you very much for that. Guys, I'm going to put all of the links to Brad's videos, the YouTube channel, Instagram, things like that in the show notes. Do come over and join in the community at Mal Mastery on Instagram, which is Mal Mastery Official. This is going to be going out, obviously, on all of the main podcast platforms, but you know that anyway because you're already listening to it. So thank you for tuning in, and I will catch up with you guys for another episode next week.